just a few minutes to see if we can get that. Are we about there, girls? Okay. Let's call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see such a big crowd this morning. Lynn, do we have roll call and already there?
It is already there.
Okay. Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, then I would ask, can I have a motion to approve the agenda and possibly the minutes from last meeting? We have a motion and a second to approve minutes and agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving right along. Betty, are you ready? I would really like to thank you for coming down today. I think this is very important, and I do hope we have viewers tuned into our meeting this morning and help them as well understand how this taxing process is working. I would give you the floor. You can introduce and kind of cap what you're going to talk about today.
My name is Betty Colquine. I'm the Pelham County Assessor, and thank you for letting me invite myself to your meeting and also for inviting me here. Today, I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation. I have to tell you, when I went over again last night, I almost lost my thought. So I'm going to try to make it interesting because there's a lot of information on how the downtown development authorities work, as well as how TIF is calculated as a whole. And also, I know that there are questions about how taxes themselves are calculated and how the assessor goes about valuing property. And because this is such a very long discussion, I'm actually breaking it into two components. Today will be a bit more about the DDA and a little bit about the values. However, on August 22nd, I'm conducting a roundtable in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce, and that is going to be a business roundtable to promote a discussion about how do why are my taxes so high, how the tax system works, what it's like, and how I pay my taxes, the way I produce my taxes, because taxes are a big issue. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and mark my presentation since there's a lot of information presented here. But I'd also want this to be informative enough that if you have questions, please ask them along the way. Again, this is a bit dry because it's how the assessors calculate it. And I believe some of you are relatively new board members, correct? A couple of you. Those that have been here might know a little bit more about how things are done on a day-to-day basis.
There's some large print here. But again, please feel free to ask questions as they come up. So the discussion objective for today is the assessor's responsibilities and duties, the downtown development authorities, their responsibilities and duties, tax increment financing, the Woodland Park DDA, how values are calculated, help me, my taxes are too high, and the future. And again, the future is going to focus a little bit on what we're going to talk about on August 22nd that is more specific to businesses. So the Office of the Assessor it's a constitutionally established office. The duties include certifying the total value for assessment of all taxable property. So when any taxing authority needs to know when they're getting ready to set their budgets, they set it based on the value that the assessor certifies on an annual basis. We certify a list of owners of record, so we're constantly monitoring the changes as to who owns property, and that's for taxable real and personal property, because again, we assess on personal property, not my personal preference, but that's just the way the state has mandated it. We discover omitted assessable property, so you'll see appraisers going around the county looking for property. When they're actually going around inspecting properties, we are looking for properties that we have not put on the tax rolls too. We designate property in any municipality, and we receive documentation, and we keep records. So that's a lot of what the assessor does. A downtown development authority is established under Title 31 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, and that authorizes a downtown development authority to use tax increment financing from municipal sales tax, ad valorem taxes, or both. And Woodland Park, by the voters' approval, only uses ad valorem taxes, so your sales taxes are not used for your tax increment financing. Assessors are directed, we are mandated by the state on how to do things. So it's not that we have a choice or an option. We do things according to the way the state has required us or requires us to do them. And the state publishes manuals. Those manuals are available for you to look at too. So I can provide that website, but you go into the State Department of Property Taxation, and there's what's called the Assessor's Reference Library. And those are 3 volumes, very, very large volumes. In fact, Volume 2, there is no Volume 1. Volume 2 has over 900 pages. But the assessor is provided guidance on how things are calculated. So the one thing about each TIF plan, and I think you've noticed this as a board, each TIF plan is unique. The state provides that guidance, but it doesn't anticipate every situation that's out there. So you will be presented with different situations, and you won't necessarily, or we won't necessarily find our guidance in there. We have the guidance, but we don't have the specifics on things. The TIF, the statutes relating to TIF do not alter the way ad valorem values and the way assessors conduct their valuation of property. So TIF is a mechanism, but it doesn't change the way we have to value property. And TIF was commenced in the 70s. It was brought about in the early 70s as a way to finance projects, and it was accepted because it didn't require new taxes, and of course that made everybody happy. It wasn't a taxing mechanism. It is a financing mechanism, and it finances projects. The projects that are financed are actually being financed from future revenues derived from that project. The expectation is, and you know this too, again, that the project will drive new growth or redevelopment, which will increase property values within the plan area. The increase is expected, or it's hoped, it will generate sufficient tax revenue to help pay for that project. So the Woodland Park DDA, on August 2nd, 2001, City Council adopted Ordinance 914 creating that DDA, and it established the boundaries of the DDA. On February 21st of 2002, City Council approved the foundation plan that also described those boundaries. And I believe that plan has been amended twice, maybe 3 times, to include a little bit of additional property. It provided, again, for only ad valorem tax funding, so no sales taxes were involved. And note that the DDA boundaries are limited to the central business district by statute. So the purpose of the DDA, and again I'm going to reiterate something you already know, is to promote health, the safety, prosperity, security, and general welfare of the people. It's also to stop deterioration of property values or structures within the central business district. So again, it's inherent in the DDA to stop that deterioration of values and to increase the property values within it. And of course, the downside from the taxpayer standpoint of increasing property values is it increases the taxes that are associated with those particular properties. Another purpose is to halt or prevent the growth of blighted areas within the district. Again, the whole idea is to improve it. And more you improve it, you're changing the values, you're increasing the values, and then, of course, the values are going to generate more taxes. So it's kind of a balancing act to help me. I don't want to pay more taxes, but I'd like my property values to go up, definitely. And it's also the purpose of the DDA is to assist in development and redevelopment of the district, and that's what we've seen happen over the number of years. It was pretty stagnant for a while, but it's actually, we've seen some improvements, and we've finally seen some growth within the area. So by statute, and this hasn't happened, but by statute, the City of Woodland Park may levy up to 5 mills on behalf of the DDA, which would create 2 revenue streams. Right now you have 1 revenue stream, but you could have the potential for 2 revenue streams. Revenue from the ad valorem tax on the base valuation, and when we talk about the base valuation is the value of the property that was in the DDA at the time that the DDA was created. Now that base changes over time because it changes with a natural increase or decrease in property values. So when we talk about the base, we start from a base standpoint, from the bottom line, the beginning. So this 2-stream process, the revenue from the ad valorem tax on the base is used for project development, non-debt funded expenses, and for annual budget operations. Now, TIF revenue can be paid into a special fund, which includes the increment that's used to finance project debt. So again, that 5 mills could create another revenue stream, but the city has chosen not to levy that addition or that mill up to 5 mills. So on a DDA, how long do they typically last? Well, they're typically established for 30 years from the effective date of approval of the plan. However, they can be extended for up to another 20 years. The governing body can terminate it by ordinance. So if the governing body decides the DDA doesn't need to exist anymore, it can terminate it. However, it must provide for any indebtedness that the DDA has incurred. So it either needs to retire that debt or make some type of provision for it. Any questions at this point? Because I'm just kind of going through the motions. So when we talk about setting the initial base value, the initial base is the total assessed value of all taxable property that was certified by the assessor just before the effective date of the plan. And note I've highlighted the word assessed because there is a difference between assessed and actual. Your actual value is the value that is the value set each 2-year cycle. The actual value is the market value of the property. The assessed value is a calculated value based on state statute. So just to give you an example here, if you follow along on the screen, how, again, residential, currently the residential assessment rate is 7.2%. The vacant land assessment rate is 29%. The commercial assessment rate is 29%. And if you notice, those numbers are significantly different, which is why there is a difference in the values between residential and commercial properties. So I've given an example up here. The market value, the way you calculate your taxes, you take that market value times the assessment rate times the mill levy, and that's your property tax. So giving the same example, a residential property with a value of $200,000 and a commercial property with a value of $200,000, you can take a look and see that the residential property, the taxes, and I used 80 mills, which is approximately the mill levy for Woodland Park, which is the Woodland Park area, including city, county, the fire district, library district, etc. It's approximately 80 mills. So a residential owner of a $200,000 property will pay $1,152 in taxes. However, the commercial property owner will pay $4,640. So I do like to play a little bit with my PowerPoints. So, I told you, once in a while, I got to keep it a little bit interesting because this can be a very dry topic. But this is one of the primary reasons why we hear the outcry from the commercial property owners. It's not something I have any control over. I have control over to some extent for the actual value, but again, I am audited by the state, and those values have to be fair and they have to be defensible, because while it seems like the assessor, and I tell people this, well, it seems like the assessor has a lot of power. I really don't. I have no power, because every step of the way, any decision I make can be appealed to a higher level of authority. So knowing that any value that is set can be appealed is another incentive to get the value as right as we can. Again, it's sometimes subject to discussion. Sometimes we have, I hope, constructive arguments over how things are done. But in any event, for any property owner who thinks that they've been unfairly assessed or unfairly valued, there is an appeal process and a board each step of the way. First level, it goes to the Board of Equalization, and their decision can be appealed three different ways, either to binding arbitration, to district court, or to the Board of Assessment Appeals. So there's a process in place every step of the way for a property owner who thinks that they are not being treated fairly. But this is mandated by state, and I don't have any control over it. Is it fair? In my opinion, no. Look at the difference there. It's not a fair. It doesn't seem fair, and it has become the gap between residential and commercial has become even wider. So the initial base. Any questions there? Because again, I have some more information to present to you.
Thank you, Betty. You just mentioned the gap between residential and commercial has grown. What do you expect that gap to do in the future?
Right now, the earliest prediction, there is a slide in here, and so I may repeat myself when I get to it. For the first time in 15 years, last year, the residential assessment rate dropped from 7.96% to 7.2%. That was due to the healthy sales up and down the Front Range, particularly of residential property. It widened the gap, and it has to do with the discussion on Gallagher, which I will address a little bit more at the business roundtable. But like I said, for the first time in 15 years, the assessment rate dropped. There were at least 3 cycles where the assessment rate should have been allowed to go up. In other words, the residential owners should have paid a larger share. However, because that collided with Tabor, and it would have required, or the interpretation is it would have required a vote of the people to increase the taxes on the residential owners, the legislature did not address that issue. So it was never allowed to float upward. Well, but it must, by statute, go down. It is now projected that possibly next year the value could go down as low as 6.2%. Now, that's not good news. That's good news for residential owners. It is not good news for the taxing districts, because again, it means that there's going to be another crunch in their revenues. Will it be 6.2%? We won't know until toward the end of the year. It could be 6.5. It could be 6.7. But it's a crunch, and it is projected to go down because, again, we're seeing extremely healthy sales in the residential market right now. In Teller County, my earliest predictions at this point, and it's early, is that our residential values are going up another 22 to 25%. However, the good news is, with the assessment rate dropping, your property value could go up 22 to 25%, but you will not see an increase in your taxes. So, that again is good news for residential owners. Now, commercial, and the jury's still out. Hopefully by August 22nd, I'll have a little bit more information. And this is very early in the process. Normally, I don't have this information until January. However, as you know, this is my last year in office, so we're trying to get the values set a lot earlier. So we may be aware, we may have some more information a lot earlier. But right now, the commercial is still not looking like it's picking up quite as much, but we have had some sales. So again, stay tuned. Hopefully August 22nd, I'll do some preliminary ratio studies and see what we can come up with to give you some information on what's happening in the commercial market. But again, it's not good news for the taxing authorities if that assessment rate drops. So the initial base on properties, the initial base value is adjusted on an annual basis. So even though the assessor revalues properties every 2 years, that base is reset every year because there are some things that happen. In other words, there are changes to properties. There's changes to use of properties. You have residential properties going to commercial. You have commercial going to residential. Vacant properties get built upon, so therefore they may become commercial or residential. And you have use changes. For instance, we've seen some of those here in town where we've had a gas station go to retail. I think the motorsports, things like that, where you have a change in the use of a property. That property can no longer be valued as a gas station convenience store. It becomes a retail store. Those are the changes that drive those assessed value changes. Also, we have personal property that's collected on an annual basis. Jan? It's in that case it might go well. Again, it depends on what the market, what we're seeing in the market. If the market for retail, if there's a saturation of retail and the retail properties are sold at lower prices, it could drive it downward. So, but on the other hand, if there is a positive market for retail properties, it could drive that value up. So it all depends on, we're doing a balancing act between what is the market demand, but it definitely changes the value of the property because it now is something different. It no longer has gas pumps and gas tanks.
You mentioned new construction on vacant land and changes in use. Those are things that affect the increment value, not the base value, right?
If it's within the DDA, and again I'll explain. I have some of these where I'm trying to take it. It's a complicated process, so I'm trying to take it to its simplest form. But there are some changes. The actual change in a property will affect the increment unless it is the base is affected by the market change, the normal reassessment change. That's what's being changed there. And again, you're going to see that is that there's what's called a windfall provision to prevent the DDA or any downtown development authority or urban renewal authority from receiving a windfall from what would have normally been a market change. In other words, if there's no change, if the DDA does nothing, it does not get any benefit from a normal change in that market. And that's, again, just the simplest way to say it. The DDA must do something because the legislature said the DDA shouldn't get the benefit of a normal market change. That should go to the original owners, the original taxing authorities. They get the benefit of that because that would have been normal. So that's that windfall provision. The DDAs must do something in order to get the benefit of the the TIF calculation. So hopefully, if it's not clear through another couple of slides, let me know. So when the annual assessment exceeds the base, the excess portion is called the increment. So what you see in blue here, that's the base value that would have been valued, and then the balance, hopefully if it went up, is the increment. So common question that I receive is, how is the increment calculated? If we grant a TIF for this project over here, how much increment will that specific project generate? Well, assessors don't calculate the increment for each property. So if I were to tell you that you're going to approve a project that's $1 million, and I said it generated $14,000, and I'm making that up, so don't. But let's just say it generates $14,000 annually in taxes. That would not be a totally true statement, because assessors calculate the increment on the aggregate in the whole area. So the $14,000 in taxes annually that one project generates is offset by the taxes that might have been diminished because there was demolition, destruction, there was a change in a property, additions, there are different things that happen, but it's calculated as a whole. So what changes affect the increment only? And that's what you're looking at. What do we need to do that changes the increment to us as a DDA? New construction, remodels and additions that improve that value, that increase the value. New personal property. If you had a company move in that generated a lot of, let's say you had like a mine, the Cripple Creek Victor mine generates a lot of personal property, but you had a business that generates a lot of personal property, that would be a positive change for you. Classification, and that includes exempt. So when you have properties that go to exempt, that become exempt type properties, that will actually decrease the increment. And demolition and destruction, obviously there's a change there. So other changes that affect the increment: when residential properties are converted to commercial, any of the increase in that presumes an increase in value, that would change the increment. When commercial is converted to residential, and you've had a number of those where commercial property owners have reconverted them back to residential, it's favorable for them for tax treatment. It is not so favorable for the DDA when you have a mass conversion back to residential. So in odd years, now this is adjustments that go to both the base and the increment. That is what we talked about earlier, a market change. The natural appreciation, depreciation in a market, that affects all properties. Both the base and the increment benefit from that. And here's just this is going to be, I'm going to run through this one real fast on the slide because this is a lot of numbers out there. But the way the assessor will do the calculation is we'll start with the previous value, we look at what the current assessed value is, and in this case there's a positive change. However, step number 4 shows that there were some non-reassessment changes. This would have been demolition, destruction, things like that. The net was 132. So you subtract it, but because you're subtracting a negative, it actually adds to the value due to the reassessment. So in any event, you can see in here that there will be a new base that will be used for calculating next year. So it's a very complicated process, but the assessor's office tracks that in detail. So the windfall protection, which was what I was mentioning earlier, that says that the statute, the DDA, can only use increases in property tax revenue that are due to those redevelopment projects. And they are not entitled to use, or they aren't entitled to a windfall that's created by the natural change based on a higher level of value, so or reassessments. You bet.
So, for example, we've had 2 remodels, significant remodels this last year for McDonald's and for Goldhill South.
Yes.
Their facade increases. So will their assessed value be increased, and therefore the increment growth will go to the DDA?
Yes.
Just wanted to share an example.
Yes. Yes, and that's true. Any of those changes, that's why it's to the DDA's advantage to help other business, not only new construction. New construction is the quick and easy hit. You get suddenly a big hit on your value. But if you help your existing businesses improve their properties, that also increases their value and increases your TIF. And that's similar to curves. I think curves had the same thing where there was an addition to the property which improved the property. So again, it's to the DDA's advantage to assist current owners too. It's not always seen as the best benefit because it isn't, or the quickest hit for the money, but that's it.
On that train of thought there, how does the assessor's office pick up that change in value as attributable to a some sort of renovation versus simply a reassessment? Is it based on permits that are pulled, or just...
Yeah, there's a series of things that we do to discover property, but yes, on an annual basis, toward the end of the year, we actually pull all the permits to see, or as many permits. We're really looking for, because there's so many permits in Teller County, we look for permits that generate $10,000 or more in value to that property. Obviously, hot water heaters and minor changes don't generate enough, but we try to pick up everything in that, and we do capture any new construction or changes within the DDA because we have everything coded by its tax district. So again, we try to capture as much information as possible. Sally?
And just the mechanism of how that works is that every final building permit is reported to the assessor's office. So I get it on my machine and their machine, their computers, that final inspection, and then they can go look and see what the value and the specifics of that building permit.
Yeah, we're really looking for that. We try to capture as much of that value as possible. Did you have a question back there? Nope. Good. Okay. Yeah. So we're capturing as much of the value that we can. Any other questions? Okay, good. The residential assessment rate I already talked about, and right now any change in the rate, when that rate goes down, does not affect the calculation because remember, that rate is on assessed value, not actual value. So briefly, and I'll just about to wrap this up, help me, my taxes are too high. We revalue property in the odd years. We're coming into it. We just ended the the data collection period ends June 30th of an even numbered year. We still have approximately 600 or more properties to pick up. We're constantly running behind. So we are in the process of pulling our information together for the 2019 revaluation. Any intervening year, when you have an odd and an even year, they are supposed to be the same, and the only changes to those values would be due to those unusual conditions, which is why we pick up permits, because if you have new construction, demolition, that's going to change the value, and the TIF is actually calculated every year. So you get, we have to pick up anything new and look at reporting that value to the taxing authorities. Commercial, from a commercial standpoint, we collect a lot of what derives value is the quality and condition of the property. The construction class, is it a Class A building? Is it a Class S steel building? The type of construction is going to is going to influence the value. The square footage is always a big how big the property is, how large the improvement is, the year built, the effective age. A lot of the driver of value, other than quality, condition, that type of thing, is also the area it sits in. The properties that a retail in Woodland Park might value higher than a retail in Florissant, depending on the property, and most likely will. Land characteristics, we pick different land characteristics up, but that's how we go about valuing it to try to make it, to equalize it. There is a specific data collection period. Once I stop collecting data after June 30th of this year, we're done collecting the data for the next for this coming revaluation. And any sales that occur from July 1st forward can't be considered. So a sale that occurs a couple of days afterwards, unless it was under contract prior to that time frame, can't be considered. And that sometimes causes a little bit of grief. And properties are valued according to what the market is doing. So if the market's going up, that's exactly how they're going to be valued. What we're seeing, and we've been seeing the influence of market forces in Teller County, is development and redevelopment. We're seeing a very large, reported at the economic forecast earlier this year, our population is going up. We've got people moving into this county. It is getting bigger. We're seeing kind of an explosion of people. Now, hopefully we're seeing some of those businesses follow behind, but we are seeing some businesses. But we're seeing the second home buyers have returned to the market. Lots of out-of-state and retirees have returned to the market. We have cash buyers. We have people with a lot of cash. and they've been sitting on that cash, so they're ready to spend, and they've been spending. Our data collection, we dropped off 2 years. We are now collecting for residential 2014, I think I've got that, through June 30th of 2018, and we pick up 5 years for commercial because we just don't have enough commercial sales in Teller County. If we had thousands of sales or even hundreds of sales, last year we only had 30 qualified sales. Those are good sales, arm's length, that we could use. Jan?
Okay, so you said you can go back 5 years
Yes.
for commercial?
Yes.
So, and if you don't have anything in there, how much further back?
That's it. No, we start with an 18. Statute says you start with 18 months of sales, but you go back in 6-month increments up to a maximum of 5 years. Now, last year, even during our audit, we lost one sale due to a remodel. If we have a remodel change after sale, it drops it off. My audit report came in within the last 2 weeks, and it stated that we only had 29 sales, and our state auditors had to do an appraisal on a property in Teller County somewhere. I don't know which one it was. It doesn't state in the audit report, but they select a commercial property, and they actually physically do an appraisal to give us that 30th sale, and that's the first time we've ever dropped below 30. And that's because we're still, our businesses were struggling there for a while. They really are. And some of you still are struggling. And, we'll do our best to help you where we can. But sometimes you have to blame the person from the other state who came in and paid real high for a property that you're thinking, why did they pay that much for that property? Sometimes people buy based on lifestyles, and they cash in their 401ks and they want to come to Teller County because it's such a beautiful place. And so they'll pay some outrageous number for a property. And if it's an arm's length sale, we have to use it. So it's something that's sometimes the market does strange things. So see your future here. Come August 22nd, 7:30 to the Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to be addressing at the roundtable business income, how your business itself versus the real estate income derive values. We don't use business income, but I'll explain that some more. So the business itself, we don't use that income. It's the income from the real estate. I'm going to look at commercial sales influences, home-based business, what's in store for 2019, why are my taxes so high? We'll go into that a bit more. Suggestions. I've got some suggestions for potentially reducing your taxes. It won't work for everybody, but there's some suggestions there. And then what's all this talk about the collision of Gallagher and Tabor in very simple forms? So again, you can tell I'm probably a good 30 minutes into my discussion. This is a very comprehensive discussion, and I really invite you to sit down with me and let's talk about it. If you have some specifics about what's going on with the market in general, and then I'll be happy to meet with you after that to talk about your property individually. Any questions? Good. Yes, Tanner?
Thank you, Betty. I'm curious about residential properties that do produce income. Are there guidelines there for you, or how does the assessor's office approach properties that have productive home offices or produce crafts or vacation rentals? Or I know it's sort of a broad
and
question.
That's a really good set of questions, because the state, there's some potential for vacation rentals. I have several emails in my inbox where they're looking at some legislation for vacation rentals, because again, a lot, particularly the ski areas, have some high dollar vacation rentals, and people who rent their homes out to others, we collect the personal property that's associated with it. However, one of the fallbacks, so for those of you who have vacation rentals, just to let you know, live in it one day a year. You got to live in it one day a year to keep your residential. There's your hint on saving, because if not, it becomes a commercial use. And we are constantly looking at the battle between the lodging that competes with the hotels and motels, and then they have the home, they are actually renting their properties out. So there's a fine balance between that, and it's becoming a statewide issue. Home-based businesses, a little bit complicated. So for the real estate person, CPA, somebody who works out of their home, who doesn't maintain a storefront, bookkeeper, we don't collect that because that's very, very hard to monitor. We work very closely with the cities. We pull city licenses from the City of Woodland Park, the City of Victor, and the City of Cripple Creek. Teller County does not license its businesses, which creates a problem for assessors for an assessor to collect licensed businesses in the county itself. But we do pull those list of licenses that the city provides us to help us know whether we need to assess that. Give you an example. I think up until last year we had a chiropractor who bought a property and set up half of that property as a commercial business. We collected. They had a sign. They had a designated parking area. It was a permitted business, right, Sally? It was permitted. So we collected a portion of that and allocated that commercially. Now, it's been sold and it's now reconverted to residential. But if it has what we're trying to do is set a standard, a fair standard, a uniform standard. If it is permitted with a sign and you're advertising and there are places to park, we're going to collect it. We're going to collect it and designating it because it's putting itself out there in the public. The individual home base, the realtor who works at home or somebody like that, those are a bit harder. We don't collect those. They're usually partial uses. It's more of an IRS thing, business use of home. So really that's kind of our guidelines at this point. Did I get all those questions? Home-based and vacation rentals. Becoming a big issue. Vacation rentals are becoming a very big issue. So anyway, yes?
You mentioned that business income doesn't affect the valuation, but the property's income does.
Correct.
And how do you use that income in your valuation?
The income approach is based on what the income derived from the real estate. So, for example, mini storage units. The income is from the real estate itself, not from the business. So the way a retail business is an owner, the enterprise value, the value of the retail business is not used to value the real estate because it doesn't account for good and bad management. If you have someone who is managing very well, we don't penalize them for assessing them at a higher rate. And likewise, if someone is not managing their business very well and they're not doing very well financially, we don't give them a benefit, or we don't reduce the real estate itself. So the income is attributable to the real estate. Again, mini storage warehouses produce income derived from the real estate. Offices, when they're renting out office space, that's derived from the real estate itself, not from the business occupying it. So that's the difference. It's not the business income, it's what the real estate will produce. Pardon me? Yes, it's when you're talking about what, say, the rental income. We'll use an income approach for a shopping center because the income to the owner of the shopping center are the rental spaces he rents out to other people, and the businesses, whether they generate positive or negative, don't affect his income. So I'm hoping that's kind of understandable. So, for example, if an owner is renting his property out and generating income from that rental, that can be used as the income approach, but not the business operation itself. Because any businesses operate differently. Some will be very successful, some will be moderately successful, and some won't do quite as well. So we can't look at the individual business operation. It's what the real estate. What would it be in a normal market? Kelly?
So when you look at a property that's a business property, how do you determine which approach that you use to value the property, whether it's the income approach or the other?
Okay, and that's a good question. Appraisers are required, because assessors are appraisers. Appraisers are required to consider all three approaches: the income, the sales or market approach, and the cost approach. You consider them, but they aren't all necessarily applicable. On extremely old properties, like some of the very old buildings in Cripple Creek that were built in 1898, cost approach is not relevant. It doesn't work real well because they're very old. Theoretically, they would be depreciated to nothing. So you're looking at most properties, we use market approach. However, if it's an income producing property, we will look at them both and we'll reconcile the values. We don't necessarily favor one over the other. Some are more appropriate depending on what the property is. Thank you. Tanner?
My last question.
Perfect. I'm good. I don't know about everybody else.
Well, this is related to public improvements and their effect on the values of private property.
Yes.
A great example that's occurring right now is Mr. Taylor's vacant land east of the Dinosaur Resource Center. He's installing some public improvements, building out streets and etc. If nothing else happened to the property, but those public improvements occurred, does that change the valuation of the property?
There are some, and I didn't put this in there because it is that is very complicated, and what I need to do is pull the portion of my instruction manual to address that specifically, and I'd be very happy to do that. But the improvements, you're actually making improvements to the property, which I believe, and I'm going to qualify it because, again, that section I didn't pull for this discussion here, but when you're talking about public improvements that are made, they are increasing that value to that property. So, and I would love to get with Mr. Taylor on that, or you, and I'll give you that section that talks about what that change would be. And again, remember, anytime you're doing any type of improvements, it's not each individually. It's going to go into, as far as the TIF calculation, the overall. But one of the things that the DDA, and I mentioned this earlier, is that you exist to help. You know, you're existing to improve those property values. And if the improvement to his property increases, it's to the benefit of the DDA. But if it's the natural increase due to the reassessment, then the DDA isn't going to get that benefit. So it's it's a balance, but increasing values is the name of the game. Which increases taxes, sorry.
Betty, the DDA has 2 projects right now that are under construction this year, but they won't be necessarily finished by the end of the year. The Microtel and the Natural Grocers construction projects. So explain to the DDA how you will assess those projects under construction.
Yes. We are required to pick up all construction partial as it stands as of January 1. So if a project is under 50%, is about 50% completed, and we have some guidance as to what constitutes 25, 50, and 75% completion, we will pick up a partial completion, and you'll get the benefit of the partial completion. So it doesn't have to be fully completed. It could be partially constructed, and you still get a benefit of that. So, but it's how the property sits as of January 1 of every single year. Oh, I'm sorry, Sally, did you have another question?
I do. I would like for you to explain one more time about the growth of the base as well as the growth of the TIF.
Okay.
I think there's some confusion for the taxing entities that their assessed value or their certified values are stagnant.
I know.
So let's discuss that a little bit more in detail.
Okay, and one of the things that I'd mentioned, which I went through pretty quickly, was that rough calculation. We started out with the prior year's assessment, the current year's assessment, and we looked at the change in value. But remember, we subtracted the changes attributable to the redevelopment project. So what that does is it allows the assessor to determine what's left over is due to a general reassessment. So that change in value benefits both parties percentage-wise. It'll benefit the majority of that unless there is a significant amount of redevelopment. The majority of that would actually go to the base. And my example showed where approximately 97% of it went to the base and only 2 or 3% went to the Downtown Development Authority. Yeah, yes. So there is a perception from the taxing authorities that, you know, we're losing significantly. Again, I'd have to look at each individual, you know, year's calculation, but the taxing authorities are now benefiting from any of the increase. Now, as I said, unfortunately, we're going to wash out the residential portion because of the change in the assessment rate. But there is a natural appreciation or depreciation associated with markets, and when markets are appreciating, everybody benefits. Both sides benefit from that appreciation. Okay. Thank you. Holt.
A very nice forensic review. Is your presentation going to be provided to the folks here if they wish, or your PowerPoint, is that going to be provided?
I would absolutely make it available, sure. Yeah, because I tried to condense some very complicated information into something that was a little bit more basic, but you can tell, as I said, I thought I'm going to lose my audience today. When I went over it last night, it wasn't exactly, it's not always the most engaging information because it really is a lot of calculations, you know, but I try to put it in an understandable form, but absolutely, I'll make that available.
Secondly, in a couple weeks on August 22nd, are you going to perhaps discuss the expansion of what's going on in Cripple Creek with the proposed expansion of the casinos? Would that be part of your dialogue by chance?
Not necessarily. It may not be specific because what I want to be able to do is address the concerns of the business owners about, you know, why are my taxes so high? Is there anything I can do to help offset those? I mean, I can talk in some generalities about expansions, but I think again, it's geared to your concerns, business owners' concerns. I also want to, and I will specifically invite those that have lodging, because there is, for those who have extended stay, in other words, for those who are renting properties out for 30 days or more, there is a benefit under the extended stay provision, and that provides a tax break if they can provide us information at the first of every year. But there's also some other things business owners can do. So trying to give you enough information, enough tools to help you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
Observations. I sat there and had the luxury of paying an additional 76% on my taxes this year, and I think that's part of what started all this process of us trying to get together. I am the business owner, but I am not the property owner. And because the property owner did not give me permission to appeal the taxes, nor did he appeal them themselves, being in a triple net lease, I am stuck right there in a triple net lease.
Yes.
Well, when the business owner is responsible for doing building maintenance, improvements, and anything else that goes on, it becomes counterproductive for me to do any of that. All I need to do is just do the absolute minimum, and I will save on my taxes, maybe. Because the only thing I did to that building between the time Mr. Mueller leased it to me and the time you came in and did the reassessment was to actually clean the bathroom so you could smell them at the front door.
Actually, we had your property on as badly worn. and I personally went to your property and had lunch there or dinner there one evening, and I went, oh my, this is not badly worn, and you would agree it's not badly worn. So the assessors again are required to periodically inspect properties and determine if they are correct. One of the suggestions I would have for you is renegotiate a provision in your lease, and I've seen this in other commercial leases. If you're on a triple net and you're responsible for paying everything's being passed through to you, negotiate the ability to protest. Put in there a provision that states that you because you're going to be responsible for it, have the ability to protest that value, and that way you can go in and protest it on behalf of the owner, and that would help you. But again, the values are, we go through an audit. I'm required to follow the way the state says to do things, and we value according to the market. And when you improve your property, and you do want to improve your property, because again, you want people to come to your business. You want them to be comfortable in your business, so you want to improve it, but you're actually changing the value of your property every time you improve it. I also have people who say, I've done no improvements to my property, why did my value go up? And it's usually because people around you are paying higher prices for the property, so you don't even have to improve it for it to go up too. So, I mean, but again, negotiate with your landlord to allow you to protest the taxes, and that will help you if you think that your value isn't fair.
Okay.
Thank you, Betty. That was very informative. Board, do you have any more questions to ask? Audience, do you have any questions or comments on this? Did it help you? Did it help our new members? Okay.
Ready?
Betty,
Oh,
Yes, sir.
sorry.
just want to go back to the base and increment understanding, just
Yes.
because that's so fundamental to the DDA.
It's hard.
My understanding is that the base properties in the district are valued for those 30 years based on if there was no improvements made to those properties, right?
No, the base was set when they were first included within the boundaries of the DDA. The last assessed value prior to the inclusion set the base.
Right, at that time when the DDA is
At
formed.
that time.
And then for those 30 years, it's adjusted only based on the market,
Correct.
as if the properties had never been improved or changed, I
There
should
is
say.
a natural market reassessment. So they do get the normal appreciation or
Exactly,
depreciation.
right, yeah.
Correct.
Excluding any improvements.
Any improvements that were made pursuant to redevelopment projects.
Now, the DDA can be extended for 20 years after that 30 years.
Correct.
But at that 30 years, that base gets reset, correct?
At 30 years, the DDA expires. In other words, if the DDA, if everything is paid off, or if the time period that it ran, the 30 years that it ran, is up, and they've chosen not to continue it. In other words, every project has been redeveloped, everything's been done according to plan. Then the TIF, and again, I'm going to have to check on this, because obviously the TIF agreements would extend for a period of time, I think up to the time it expires. So they could not extend a TIF agreement past the time the DDA goes away. So then it goes back to everything is revalued and redistributed, and because there is no DDA.
Yeah. So, and I think I read this in DDA statutes, but at that 30 years, the base has to be reset to zero. If there's an extension of the DDA for 20 years, essentially at that 30-year point, the DDA revenue goes to zero.
Well, the DDA, as I said, the DDA goes away. There is no DDA.
Right.
So basically it goes back to the way it was prior to. In other words, whatever the values of the property at that time period would go to the taxing authorities.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to clarify that, because it sounded like
It doesn't go on
you
forever.
just extend on that that same base for another 20 years, and I don't think that's not true.
Yeah, that, again, we can pull our information and take a look just to confirm make sure that you and I are both on the same page. Okay. All right.
Okay. Betty, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you.
Yes, it was very informative. Okay, moving along, we have a TIF application that Ellen and Al have put together for us. It's kind of been on hold through some of the other projects that we've gone through. I think that needs to be addressed, and I'm asking the board, do you think that we could address that today and either approve that or decide if we need to have more conversations about it to move on for approval? I'd like to have a little conversation on that. Ellen, Al, do you feel comfortable that it's ready to go?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Certainly promoting the simplicity of it. Only getting the DDA involved after the project has gone some distance. After the financial component of that project has been addressed and approved so that we know it's a viable project, it certainly, I think, reduces the DDA's complexity of an application process, as evidenced in some of the examples that we had from other cities. Ellen and I went down to about three and a half pages compared to 15, 17, 20 pages in some other communities.
And Lynn. Good for you.
Because there was stuff that they were asking for that was really redundant that we didn't need to worry about because the business venture was analyzed by far superior people. Once they determine that the project is viable and they're willing to put their money into it, that's all that we need to know, whether that project will be viable or not. If the financial people say, yes, we are willing to put in a huge amount of money, that's all that we need to know, rather than trying to do an analysis in depth like that.
Good.
So yes, simplicity is important to us. We get the information that we need, but not superfluous information, so that we can then administer it properly.
Okay, great.
Ellen?
The only thing I wonder is whether the board is ready to vote on it, whether they came today thinking that we might vote on it, and I don't think everyone is prepared to do that final look-see. I do think it's a great basis for a developer who's coming to town to see what our DDA is expecting of them, especially a good starting point.
Okay.
So is everybody...
Kelly,
That's what
did
I think.
you have a question on?
I don't have a question, no. I appreciate everything that's gone into this and the hard work that's done. I think it's a good product. However, I guess I have to express, being new to this board, I have to express my position and what I would like to see or even suggest to this board is I'm ready, and with the issuance of new debt, I would like to propose a consideration of a moratorium on TIF. I think that with the life that's left in this organization, the amount of debt that we have on the books, I would like to see this organization rein that operation in and focus on debt reduction, paying off our obligations, and using the time for the life of this organization to do just that. And if you will, go to sleep. Not go to sleep in an investment in the community. I think that there's opportunities for us to do exactly the mission that, as Betty described earlier, and move forward in that, if you will, dormant stage. from a TIF and development perspective. Obviously, we would want to take into consideration things as they come up, because there may be opportunity that might be missed if we didn't. But I just would like to see, it's just been years, and I just think that's a healthy direction for this board.
Point taken. I would say that definitely is to be considered. That, and I think that goes on for more conversation about
Yeah, absolutely.
that. Al, go ahead.
I'm right there with you on that. This is just methodology.
Yes.
The other part here is a policy reflection that is a separate topic. And yes, it should be, talked at the appropriate time. Yeah. So they're two separate things.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess, Tanner?
Well, I agree with what Al just said. It almost feels like a fork in the road with the idea of adopting an application form to facilitate TIF reimbursement applications, and then a consideration of moratorium on TIF reimbursement agreements. And yet I agree. The way I see this is really just a tool in the toolbox. It's part of the methodology, and if we did adopt it, perhaps at the next meeting, as such, without the intent of it being policy, then we could still consider policy decisions like no more TIF reimbursement for a period or indefinitely or whatever. That said, I came prepared to discuss it, vote on it, but I don't think it was included in the board packet, was it? No? Okay, so maybe putting it...
I think we've all had it. I think we've had time to review it. I'm just not sure if it needs to be re-reviewed.
Well, I do like the document as a tool. I think it helps to organize steps in the process and information and make things a little bit simpler and easier to understand.
Let me ask you this. So, Tanner, you would be prepared to decide on whether yes or no to adopt it today?
Well, yeah, depending upon the
Okay.
intent of the document and what we're adopting it to do. If it's just to adopt this document for the purpose and for informational purposes and to facilitate anyone applying, so be it. If it's to establish some sort of policy or bind us in any way, shape, or form, I'd say no. But that's me, and I understand Ellen's point and would agree that it's probably best to, maybe consider this the initial posting and bring it up.
Okay. So this is initial. Jerry, how do you feel? Are you ready to decide? You want to wait until the next meeting and decide? Okay. Jan, are you ready? Okay. Okay.
I just have to say, I agree with what you both have said, and I think you kind of finished up what I introduced. I agree. As a tool, I think it's a marvelous document. I think you've done a great job. I'm ready, but I think if we give it an opportunity and have some public comment, maybe at the next meeting might be appropriate.
I think that there's enough of us here who need to review it. Murph, I would assume, out of courtesy, you feel the same.
Oh, yeah, I'll go with the
Okay.
review, but I'd
Then-
also like to see it posted on the website for public comment.
Then I would ask, can we put this on next month's agenda and have this on the website, have it available to the public, do some discussion,
ready.
and take a vote to approve this as a tool, not particularly policy, but as a tool? Would that be
Yes.
satisfactory for all?
Yes.
Audience, do you have any input in that? Does that sit well with all of you? Then we'll add that, Lynn, to the agenda next month, and please be ready to vote on it. Okay. Now we are on to financial report, Tanner.
Okay, following the consensus that we reached at last month's meeting. I've continued to work with Vector Bank, Kutak Rock, and Paul Benedetti, as discussed previously. Conrad Freeman and I from Vectra, along with Paul Benedetti and Kelly Case, have gone back and forth a bit on the details of a potential loan. So far, what's shaping up is a drawdown bond with a $1 million maximum approved limit, no prepayment penalty if we pay from revenue. You know what, I'm sorry, let me back up. A drawdown bond with a $1 million maximum approved limit, a 3-year draw period with $100,000 minimum draws, maximum of 2 draws per year, corresponding 3-year lockout on any refinance of any new debt, no prepayment penalty if we prepay the debt from our revenues, but we're still negotiating whether or not there'd be a fee imposed if we refinance that debt in future years. Interest rate formula is the 10-year FHLB, which is Federal Housing Loan Bank. Thank you. Plus 2.5% times 80%, which would make the rate as of last week 4.78%. Interest rate on any future draws would be calculated the same way. The payment term not changing, so the rate with any future draws would effectively become a blended rate. Fees for the issue can be paid from the proceeds. Vector Bank's charging a one-time $2,500 fee. I anticipate the bond attorney and general counsel's fees would be significantly higher. Finances being what they are currently, I anticipate an initial draw of approximately $300,000, give or take, depending on additional discussion with the board as to plans and expenses incurred as those come in. With regard to the lawsuit and the judge's ruling, which has not yet come, but if it were to be against the DDA and we owe damages, that draw for that initial, the amount for the initial draw would be higher. If the ruling is for us and we are owed any damages, I would suggest the $300,000 initial draw, give or take, and any funds we might collect, if any, at any point could be used as early debt payment. If we reach final agreement with Vectra on the terms of a loan, then ordinance would be drafted in time for initial posting at the August 16th council meeting, which is 2 weeks later than we originally scheduled. All of this, of course, is still subject to this board's approval and then city council approval. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, Neil?
Would you disclose what you've paid relative to the suit and how much you think you're going to owe when the suit's over? Do you have any sense of that you can share with us?
Well, it's not yet clear. We do not, and I don't expect that we will owe $300,000 to the attorneys. I think that number's closer to $150,000.
Can you tell us what you've paid so far?
So far, year to date, I think we're at $183,000, but that is not all necessarily lawsuit related.
Thank you.
We have tried, just to throw into this, we've tried to avoid this at all costs, but obviously we're in a position where the uncertainty of things, it's a security. We try not to borrow money against this basically line of credit unless we have to, but we feel we need to be prepared if we have to do that. But it would be at a necessary action and not just something we would frivolously do to go on a spending spree. So just so everyone knows, it's at a necessity. Tanner?
There is some additional benefit, though it does come with cost. This loan, should we proceed with it, would allow us to complete payment of all expenses for the year that we've incurred as a result of the litigation, make the city payment in full, all the TIF reimbursements, all the operating expenses, and is an available line of credit, if you will, that could be drawn on in the future, not just for this DDA's purpose, but if we were to accelerate debt payment to the city for whatever reason, should the city find themselves desirous of accelerated debt service payments from the DDA, we would have that credit available to do so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then does the board have any questions about this? What do you need from this board to date, Tanner, to continue the talks with Vectra and Benedetti? What do you need from us?
Just a consensus of the board still to stay the course. If there is any concern or change in direction, I need to know it.
Okay, does this sound good?
I would just suggest that there will be an ordinance that will come forward that will authorize the city to issue the bonds on behalf of the DDA, and that ordinance will be approved by council in its typical process of first reading and then public hearing. I think this board needs to have an opportunity to approve that ordinance before it does go to the city council, so we're planning on August 16th first reading. So I would suggest that everyone should be prepared to have a brief special meeting in order to approve that ordinance, to send it to the council, just so we take that action as a board and approve that ordinance and the terms of it before the council considers it. That would just be my recommendation.
Point taken. Tanner, do you feel that between Paul Benedetti and Vectra and yourself that could be prepared before the 16th for us to have a special meeting?
I'm hoping so. I've had a hard time connecting with Conrad at Vectra lately just to try and finalize this, but I feel like we're pretty close, and it won't take more than maybe one more conversation with them to have this done.
Okay. Then I would ask, do you recommend we set a date now on that special meeting? Oh, Suzanne?
Thank you. I just want to remind you of the deadlines that we have for the city council meeting on the 16th. You're saying it's going to be before council on the 16th. You can't just review it on the 15th.
No.
We are obligated to post it as a municipality on our agenda in the newspaper and follow our processes, which are getting very close because our packet is due to go out on Friday. I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Oh, this Friday.
Yes.
Correct. I don't want you guys
Ouch.
to be disappointed.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that heads up.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So, Tanner, do you think you could have something ready by Thursday? After tomorrow?
We will. Say yes, Tim.
I'm told yes.
Okay. then
Doing everything we can. We've been working hard to try and push this along and get it done. So, and I really think we're close.
Then can I ask the board, could you possibly show up on Thursday morning to do just a quick approval of that? So it can be put in Friday? Suzanne, go ahead.
Oh, I would not be able to, as I have another meeting Thursday morning,
Oh,
8 o'clock.
okay.
Yeah.
Then can we have your opinion on this?
Yes.
With your consensus, whatever the boards decide, we can move forward?
Be happy to review whatever comes my way, yes.
Okay, and then you can
Absolutely.
leave word with yay or nay or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay. Could we do that at Thursday morning? We don't have to come at 7:30. Suzanne, would this chamber be open, or the conference room, that we could quickly?
We're trying to stop for you.
We can just meet in the conference room.
If we could do that, what, at 8 o'clock or 8:30? Jen, you have your hand up? No.
Oh,
8 o'clock or 8:30 just to review this?
8:30 would be great.
Okay. Does that suit the rest of the board?
Yes.
I'll have to dial in.
Okay. Okay, 8:30 Thursday morning, and we will,
Wow.
and we'll do it very quickly and just have a conversation to approve this 4 counts. Good? All right. Thank you, Tanner, Kelly, for moving forward with this timely fashion. Audience participation, I guess we're general discussion. Murph, can I start with you, and we'll do this quickly. We've got about 10 minutes, so.
Sure. First off, although Betty has left, I really appreciate her coming down here to give us an update and give us a comprehensive review on how the TIF works. Me being in a Class O building, which rhymes with old, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be mitigated. I mean, all the vent pipes up on the roof, they're all lead, okay? There's just huge, so fortunate it's grandfathered in, but keeping things going in the businesses, I see it, this is a kind of a dual-edged sword. I want the business property to be nice, I want it to be presentable, I want people to be able to come in and everything, but as the business operator and not the property owner, there is no incentive whatsoever for me to improve this property prior to my purchasing it, because all I'm going to do is increase the value for Mike and pay for the items, pay for the improvements, and then pay for those improvements again when I purchase the property. So it's kind of one of those dual-edged swords of, how do we incentivize the business operators to do the right things? You know what I'm saying? As far as the tax increment funding application goes, as long as that does not hit the policy level, I'm cool with it. And one thing I'd like to remind everybody, I don't know if it's going to happen, I'm going to have to find out, but it is National Night Out at the park tonight. If the weather permits, come on over and I'll make you a cotton candy cone if I can find some more paper cones to make them out of.
Bring your own
Thanks.
cone, huh? Okay. Thank you, Murph. Al?
Nothing additional, thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
I enjoyed Betty's presentation very much. Thank you.
Kelly?
Nothing, thank you.
Nick?
I do appreciate Betty coming since I'm so new to it and trying to learn it all at one time. Just on a side note, I did talk to a local business owner that just opened or purchased a building. They've redone the parking lot already. We've talked to them about possibly applying for a TIF. That'll be later on, maybe. But they do fall within the district. And, and as far as the other thing goes too, getting that approved, I feel the same way Murph does about it not being policy, but as a tool. Love it. Thank you.
Good. Well, I'd just like to quickly say we had a wonderful weekend. There were people all over Woodland Park. I think Dino and Notes was awesome, and the art, Mountain Arts was just had people everywhere.
And the Critter
Glad to
Fest.
see that. Yes, glad to see that. And I appreciate the hard work that all the volunteers and those people go to. And we didn't get too bad a rain, so I kudos off to them. Thank you. Lynn? Anything?
Questions, clarification. The Thursday meeting, sorry, at 8:30, that's an open meeting. We'll need to post an agenda, correct? Yes. Okay.
You remind me of Val. Just throw it. Okay, Jan, anything?
Just a couple things. You're right about the weekend was great. It's kind of funny because when it starts to darken up and it's going to threaten rain, we all know it. You just hang around a few minutes. The sun will come back out. People who come here who are not used to that, they run. Maybe we need to educate them. Hang around
was educational for you on TIF as well. It has taken us about 20 years to get it figured out, so good luck.
I have no idea.
I look forward to attending your Portland. Now on. So I don't live here in town, but I do live here in the county, and I'm a native of the area. And, I'm sorry. So I look forward to being here quarterly, not just here at the DDA, but the city council meetings, and continuing Betty's lines of communications. And so this year I'm on a discovery stage, if you will, listening, learning, as my attorney friends would say, discovering, and that's what candidates do. And so I look forward to working with you all. As Betty did state, she follows state law strictly. The state is very, very thorough on assessing and appraising. So it's 99.9%, almost 100%, is what she does, according to state law. She has to follow it strictly. So very, very little leeway, but she did a great job on education. I would encourage you all to get her presentation today on PowerPoint, and then attend her presentation in 2 weeks. But I look forward to working with you all and the rest of the other candidates next year. And I plan on, again, being here often and visiting with you all. And if I can help, I will. And we'll do the best we can.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you. I didn't mean to break sequence. Thank you, Cole. But I just wanted to get that in on the tail end of Betty's. Jerry, do you have anything? Okay. Tanner?
I just want to share quickly that on August 1st at 5 o'clock, we held a meeting with representatives from the City Council, City Staff, Historical Preservation Committee, UPass Historical Society, Main Street Program, DDA, Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, Harvest Center, and am I missing anybody? Yeah, from Council, yeah. Just to discuss overlap in our various goals and objectives and how we might use teamwork and communication to work together and align our efforts as we all advance towards our common goals. So the meeting went very well.
It was a very good meeting. Very good meeting. Very positive. Upbeat. And on the heels of that, Tanner, I would like to ask Kelly if you would please put together, now that we have a new city manager, and now that you have an idea of when he will be in swing with us, for a workshop. Whether that, and maybe we can talk about that at the next meeting.
Okay.
And you could put that workshop together for us sooner rather than later, according to his new schedule.
Okay, and I would like to just comment on the group that Tanner has just described. I've had a couple of calls from folks in the community, business owners, and they have asked if that could be opened up to more than just those groups. Invite business owners, invite the lodging owners, the folks that own the lodging in town, folks that are in different business, not just in those committees and groups, to be invited to come. So I would just suggest, because I'm going to participate in that as well, let's open that up and do an open invitation to ask folks in different areas to join us, to give input. Yes.
Was there interest in doing this? And would everybody work together? So
Sure.
I don't see
Absolutely. Get some new ideas, new blood, new eyes.
the meeting was such a positive.
Absolutely.
And everybody was on board to do this. So yeah.
Absolutely. More the merrier.
Well, let's talk about how to put that word out.
Let's do. Okay.
Tanner, did you have anything else after I interrupted you?
No, ma'am.
Great. I think that could be, again, again, some workshops we can work on through the winter time to open that meeting up. We can move forward with that. Good idea. Okay.
Just one alibi, Mary Jo. One of the things I want to point out again, it is events that drive this town and drive our tax revenues. I did around 3.5 to 4% my average sales tax, or my average revenues on Saturday when Vino and Oates was in town. I was supposed to engage that, but unfortunately I could not find enough staffing to make that happen. But I still got a lot of bleed over into my business.
Yep. Thank you. Audience participation. Darlene, do you have anything?
I'll just report briefly.
Good morning. I'll just report briefly that yesterday, Sally, on behalf of the city, Paul Sunier, the Main Street representatives, Jan, Renee, myself, we sat on a conference call with our first kickoff call with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade on this grant opportunity. We will be working with community builders. They did the parking and walking audit with us. And what we're doing is now defining the scope of work with them. So the group that Tanner was referring to that met August 1st, that group will help, I believe, in providing some guidance that we can bring back to community builders. But nonetheless, what we're looking at initially and then ultimately is a vision for downtown and what we thought we would like to see come from them, and we're hoping that they will bring that expertise, is basically a before and after vision, renderings, if you will, for our community, for our downtown. What is it we want it to look like? We will then be able to take that information and move forward to specific improvements. One of the conversations that were talked about was how would we want then to engage with communications with the city in application of the lodging tax. Examples would be application for beautification. But let the experts, the design experts, the planning experts, which community builders are, bring forth that guidance, if you will, to help create consensus within the community. Because basically we all have the same ambition, and that's to make our downtown the best it can be, but we have different approaches. Some of them focusing specifically on pedestrian safety and enhancements, others on traffic calming, narrowing of lanes, if you will, others in crosswalk safety enhancements, as well as beautification and other, if we look at building facade improvements, etc. But I'll let Sally, as we get around with the mic, to enhance what I just said. But we're looking forward to meeting with them again. They will be coming to our community builders. We will have a community engagement meeting, charrette, if you will, wherein that we will bring all the businesses, all the community leaders, council, staff, all of our partners together, and we will have an input session. And our community will help drive that focus and have a product that we can use to go forward and gather up funding for those improvements.
Thank you, Darlene. That sounds very promising.
That'll happen, I think, September. We're looking at September, October for the initial charrette.
Good. Great. Yes, Jerry. Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you, Jerry. We'll try to wrap this up here in a few minutes. Thank you, Jerry. Suzanne?
I just have a few reminders. Tomorrow is our first budget work session for the City Council and the City of Woodland Park. We'll be here in this room beginning at 5:30 for the grueling process of the 2019 budget, and our new city manager-to-be will be with us tomorrow night. So he's joining us for that. So we're pretty excited about that. Also wanted to remind the DDA and the public that today is the ribbon cutting for our wastewater treatment plant, which is something, it's not sexy, but it's exciting. It's exciting. Kip is so proud of this project. He has finished it on time, under budget. We're having a ribbon cutting at noon, and we'll be serving hamburgers and hot dogs. Our guys will be out there grilling, so please, if you get a chance, come by to that. And then last, I wanted to remind everyone, as Murph said, National Night Out is this evening, and we're hoping for a nice evening, no rain. So please join us if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Debbie, I know you have some.
Just following up again, the ribbon cutting today, make sure to make that. What a great thing that it was finished on time and under budget. So we're proud of that. August 14th, the Chamber is hosting, along with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, a meeting on the deer population within Woodland Park. Statistics will be given from the Parks and Wildlife information officer, and they'll talk to us about solutions. And so it's probably been one of the meetings that I've seen the most sign-ups coming in for. There are people very passionate on one spectrum or the other. So I'd urge you 6 to 8 that night at the Ute Pass Cultural Center, August 14th, Tuesday. And then again on August 22nd, we're working with Betty to talk to the business owners. This will be a very collaborative and interactive one-on-one with her during this meeting, 7:30 to 9, August 22nd, again at the Ute Pass Cultural Center. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie. Sally, do you have anything? Okay. Does anyone else have anything? If we have no more, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting. And do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
I love the spear hunts.
Spear hunts. Spear deer hunts. Well, oh dear.